chess friends. This is International Master Valeri Lilov, and welcome to my new course on the practical endgame strategy and different techniques you can use to get into successful endgames. I suppose the first question to you isn't going to be about the course itself because you already know what's in it. It's more about how to study it efficiently, which is really what I'd like to bring you as a suggestion to begin with. First and foremost, remember that endgames are not about theory. Unless we're talking about endings, and this is really not our topic. Endings don't happen that often. The difference between practical endgames and actual endings is that the endings are mostly the final stage of the endgame, with just a few pawns, or usually no pawns, or other pieces like the king and one more pair of rooks or something. And they're rather theoretical, rather easy if you know the position. But most times we don't get those. Those happen rather rarely. In most times what we get are positions which are much more, I'd say, practical. The queens are off the board, and then we have to figure out how to go from there. Like, how do we plan our activity? How do we think about, just the different resources? So in those type of end games, you got to be thinking schematically. You have to really remember the right principles to help you succeed. So there are really three ways I could suggest you to study the scores and try to implement it in your games. The first one is understand that this is a collection of techniques. You need techniques. So a lot of the concepts that I'm going to give you are real good questions and techniques that you could use directly in your next game. So you got to practice on thinking about them over and over again when you play. The second is, obviously, play thematic endgames. You watch a video, you take some notes, brilliant. Play some thematic games with your computer or against friends. Analyze them. Find out which of those patterns you were able to use and which you didn't. And three, study the great master endgames. Study not so much their endings, but rather what they do once they get into the position with queens off. Can you spot where they get an advantage? What are the key points that they use to grow their position? If you're able to do that, it means you're already on your way to becoming a better player. So, I hope you have a fun time with the upcoming lectures. Hello chess friends, this is International Master Valeri Lilov, and today we're going to be talking about practical endgames. The concept of practical endgames basically begins with the idea that every endgame is not theoretical unless there are fewer pieces on the board or the position is well known as winning or drawish, or sometimes even losing, from a book. So basically we could assign that every position with the queens exchanged is more considered an endgame. That is just a terminology. But it is also a very specific stage of the game where most of the things that we know about middle game or even about openings are quite invalid. Things like the idea of attacking the king or starting some sort of tactical sequences. They just don't happen. So I want to start our training with a very instructive endgame position. That's actually the study of Santorini. The reason why I think this is such a beautiful example to begin with is because we have something that many would consider almost an ending. We have no pawns, so basically white is a knight up, and he's looking for an actual checkmate possibility. We got rook to the d8, which will look really winning. So if you think about this from black's side, you're almost immediately going to say, okay, this is not supposed to be anyhow good. Black is likely going to lose, especially if this, rook jumps in and moves to attack down there. That's true. I mean, this is exactly what white is looking for. However, what is really important is to know that this is a drawish position. Like some of the basic concepts show us that this is supposed to be drawish. White wants to do rook to the d8 checkmate, and yet, a position of king and knight with a rook is not possible to win. It's just very well-known concept. But how should black play? See, this is where the practical side of everything really goes. We're talking about a decision, a critical decision that black has got to make. What does he do? In the game, or in the study, black does the natural rook c1. And this move is actually very natural because in case of anything like, say, rook d8, black's intending to play rook c8, blockade, so there's no checkmate. And yet this move loses. Let's talk about why it loses. Like, what could be the reason for a move like that to lose? The correct idea is to play king c8. Move the king, get it closer to the middle, and then do everything right. So why would a move like the one that we just saw actually lose? There's no point. It actually just doesn't make any sense. It's the same kind of idea. It's the same type of thing. So why? The only reason, and the way I want you to understand it, is this. When it comes down to playing these type of positions, literally everything is about activity. Endgames are always about activity. If activity is not present, nothing else really matters. Hence the reason why all the black had to do was just to make sure that his king is one step closer. He can go towards the d7. He could have actually kept the possibility of playing, rook anywhere. And in fact, the rook would be still keeping the white king down. It would have been a very easy way to make things work. Very easy way. And yet, it doesn't quite go like that. It goes the other way around. Practically after the move of rook c1 that black picked up to do, white continues with a rook d3, and now we can see that with the limited position of the black king, none of his pieces are in condition to help out. So we have the black king kind of bad. The rest of the pieces are missing. The rook is forced to sit terrible and defend. And really just that's the one thing that fails him. One of the biggest ideas, one of the biggest concepts of a position like that is never to put yourself in a passive or backward position. Now, why is that? Why do you think? Because being in a passive or a backward position in an endgame costs everything. Endgames are never about attacking. They're never about threats. They're about potential. Potential means like what we can actually expect to get later on as the game continues. So this is a very interesting idea. If he is unable to make something, really important, this wouldn't really matter. That is the key. And now we could understand why that actually fails black. The key idea is, remember, never sit passive or backward. Now, I start with this, and I wanted to start with this because it is the fundamental law that matters in most endgame positions. Now, let's see anyway, how does black lose? Now, the interesting part is that if he does go with something like rook to the, if a move like this, king c8, which is a possibility, it's really not going to work. Simply because, a move of that kind will quickly lose. And you're probably wondering, okay, how is this going to lose? Well, there's a checkmate in two moves, actually. We have knight a7, king b8, and then rook d8. So he's unable to protect. Now, I didn't see that immediately, but, that's the thing, rook d3. And now you see it's too late in some way for black. It's kind of late. He doesn't want it, but that's what's really going to happen. And most of these positions, it's late. You cannot, if you stay back, even if it's just for one move or two moves, there's no going down. There's no going away. He was going to lose. And that's big. It's too big. So now black plays rook c2, the only way to kind of try and step out. But then white plays rook d1, very interestingly. We're just waiting. Can't move the king because of that knight a7. The rook is still looking at the d file, so that the d8 is always present. Black plays rook c4. And now what would you like to do? Let's think about what white must play. He's having this really strong knight wearing down black's king. The king, on the other hand, is perfect. But it's still not enough to necessarily determine the immediate victory. I mean, there's got to be something that we can do differently. And that's, I believe, a key question now. So how does white do that thing that he needs to do? How do we provide for those type of tactical activities and everything? Is it even possible? How are we going to do it? Great question, actually. Well, the reality is we just keep pressuring. Rook h1 provides, you see, as opposed to the black rook that is tied down to just one opportunity, to one idea, white doesn't have to limit himself to that. What white is able to do pretty effectively, actually, is regroup, get the rook, and make it on the most. Now, activity often has to do with scope. How much is the scope of the given piece that you're having? If you have a good scope, you can really rely on that. That's a really good idea. Now, white is increasing the scope of the rook by pushing it a little bit away. And then, so it's a perfect thing because we're just going to have that chance to go to the h7 or h8. So there's not a whole lot black can do about that. Black could do rook c2, and yet now white plays knight d4. Again, the more flexibility the white pieces are having, the easier, stronger it gets for him to use it. He could now advance effectively with the move of knight c6. It's really wondrous. I mean, just how fast, how quickly black is getting or ending up in trouble. So it's a perfect position. Now let's take a look and see what comes out next. After knight d4, black did a rook to the b2 with a check, and then white plays actually with the move of king to c6. We've got a really strong king of a really wonderful type of position, not only of the king, but also of the knight, and everything is terrific. Black plays king a8, and then white plays rook h3. Why are we doing this? Well, see, again, this is a kind of a nice little waiting move, but it does what is fairly necessary so that, he's kept back. The king is kept in the corner. Our king is holding a very strong opposition. It's called a line diagonal opposition. And then, with that in mind, black is in trouble. Just remember that. See, the key is keep the opponent on the downside, restricted, and limited. Now he's got problems. Can't move away. He can't just actually step out. Let's take a look and see. This is rook h3, rook b1, rook h2. Now, you may find those moves completely useless, and I wouldn't blame you. They don't look particularly brilliant. So why are we doing them then? If they're not looking brilliant, what's the point? The point of each and every one of those moves is to wait. Patience is the greatest virtue you could ever have in an endgame position. Nothing overcomes patience. The idea is that if you're patient enough in a similar position, you will be able to let the opponent to kind of wait, just make the mistake. Because people make a lot of mistakes in the endgame. You just don't want to be the one who makes them first. This is really interesting. After rook to h2, black played rook to b2, and then we have knight b5. Rook c2, king b6. And suddenly we realize that black's rook actually got severely limited by ours. The king is perfect. The rook is even bigger in terms of action and activity. And look at black. He is already too terrible. Rook h8 is actually coming in too. It's impossible for him to do the defense. He can go king b8, of course, knight d6, rook b4 check, king c6, and just stay. And now the best of all things in this type of position is that you get, the most important is you have a coordination. Coordination of your pieces are very, very important, is a key idea in this case. Just we get that type of position is that, number one, rule number one. See, what you like to do in this type of position is to remember that idea. The key is get the pieces into the play, correct them, set them up, and then you have this, this is a great thinking to consider. Let's take a look. We've got the ability to play up with the move of rook to h8, and now we have that possibility to come up with a knight c8. The black king is away. We have that ability to play with the move of king c7 or even knight b6 in this position. It's a really, really, really nice idea. So after that type of move, what actually happens in the game is that black is lost. He's in what we call a Zugzwang. Zugzwang type of position means that he can't move anywhere. He goes rook to the b1, you've got knight to the b6 check here, and then rook to a8. Rook a8 is an easy, quick checkmate. Can't move the king, he can't move the rook, he can't really go anywhere else. It's great. One of the biggest things about Endgame, take the possibility to regroup, coordinate, and more importantly, stay patient when you're playing these positions. Getting the pieces to connect and letting the opponent make the mistakes are the best practical ideas you could ever use within a similar position. That's what you have to be looking for. So what I want to show you now are a couple of great examples on how practical endgames could work. So the one that I want to go on with was actually a game that was played by Vladimir Kramnik himself versus Valeri Lilov. Let's have a look. So in this game, Kramnik was playing with white, and actually this doesn't look like a bad position. Everything looks clear here. And so, for instance, we have these two rooks out there. We got like an extra pressure against the opponent, and everything is good. So, actually what you would like to consider is, what do we do now? Very important question. The rooks are good, and then what we have to do is to figure out where to come forward. So do we have anything to do? Any advancing possibility? And so, first and foremost, white's got nice looking rooks. It's got good challenge. If we exchange on the c6, black is going to retake. And then obviously we're going to lose an exchange. Going back means that he's going to play with the move of knight to b6. So, what to do now? What's the right way to go? Very interesting in this type of position. So, what should white do now? The key, first and foremost, is to think, what are the right candidates? One possibility is that we could continue with a move of a rook to the a5, and then we can come out with a move of rook to a7. But then if we do a move like rook a8, black could just do the move of rook to d8. Then in case of rook c3, black can come out with a move like king e6. Now we could do a move of f5 eventually, but then black will play g takes f. Then he's going to have the move of rook to the g8 out there, and things are good. See, here's a problem. See, all of this looks more like a deviation. A couple moves that deviate from the main line of events, mostly because there just isn't enough for white to achieve by basically keeping his pieces disorganized or discoordinated. So let's go back to the initial position. Let's talk. So what should white be doing right now? He's got space and things, but the most important thing that you have to understand is that endgame is not about moving around. It's not about something else. Endgames are all about activity. And I mean literally all about activity. So how do we really fix that? How do we make this work at that particular moment? Well, the first thing that white picked up to do in this type of position was the idea of bringing rook takes to the c6 on. This move wasn't, however, connected with the possibility to just get a good line for the rook. However, what really happened, as a matter of fact, is that after rook takes to the c6, b takes to the c6, white captured with his rook, and then now we have the possibility to attack black on the c7 and keep him down, which is really what this whole thing is about. It is rarely about tactics. It's about the positional improvement and the relevant activity that matters most. So, what black has to do in this case is to play rook b8, and then what we're actually seeing is that white plays rook takes g6. Now, did black have any other way to go? He could have played king d8, but that would have been horrible, considering the tremendous power and domination of the white king. So black played rook to the b8. White does rook takes g6, rook takes b2, and now f5 goes on. If he takes, we have rook e6. Black got the activity, but that came at the cost of white's tremendous power of each of these pawns, the great rook, as well as the e6 pawn that drives the black knight away. Finally, there was this incredible g4 move, which we could see forces black to move his knight away, now giving us a wondrous opportunity to take c7 and dominate. Or when he didn't do it, white just played e5, and he was winning. There, king e4. Something interesting, like many people would wonder, is why didn't black take after all? Well, because he couldn't stop the activity of white's pieces, plus the passed pawns and the incredible king. He would have lost really quick. So, piece activity, coordination, and passed pawns happen to be the three most important rules that you can base your play in basically any endgame.